Welcome to Conversation Mill. Join me as I talk to individuals stepping out to pursue their passions, from small business owners to community leaders, and learn with me how we can work together to support our local communities and local economies. Visit conversationmill.com to learn more, but now please join us in conversation. Humans have been making cheese since we first milked a goat or cow. I'm not exaggerating. The history of cheese making goes back thousands of years, and no one knows who that first brilliant person was that curdled milk. Not only leading to cheese, but creating the first cheese curd. Being a Wisconsinite, I have cheese as part of my DNA. Gibbsville Cheese Factory, named after the small hamlet it resides in, has been our go-to cheese shop for as long as I can remember. I've been giving Gibbsville cheese as gifts for years and dropping in on visits home for fresh cheese curds and more. But with all this love for cheese, I've never spent time learning the history of our local cheese factories. Sheboygan County, Wisconsin alone once had 200 cheese factories, with Gibbsville Cheese Factory being one of these. Current owner Phillip Van Tatenhove is honoring his grandparents and parents by leading Gibbsville Cheese in its 89th year. And on today's episode, he shares Gibbsville's history and the changes the cheese-making industry has seen. We recorded this episode in the factory office, so you will hear the sounds of business going on around us, because the cheese-making can't stop. Now join us in conversation. All right. So my first question is, maybe an obvious question, but I'm obsessed with cheese. I love cheese. I'm a cheesehead. Why is our Wisconsin cheese the best cheese?
I think it's because of our milk shed, you know, our climate, our soil, because that's what your milk's going to taste like. And, you know, your main ingredient's milk. If your milk tastes bad, your cheese is going to mimic what it tastes like, because, you know, it's your terror of your soil and everything. And we've been doing it a long time, so we've got skill set for doing it, but it really comes down to milk. Yeah. Our milk is, we have better milk, I think, than a lot of places. You know, we have, you know, they want to milk cows every place now, you know, where they're not historically, you know, milk cows. So they got to bring in feed from everywhere, where they don't do that in Wisconsin. We don't buy feed from a long ways away. Your farm, your land, you know, that's where it comes from.
This was a question I had a little bit further in the podcast, but since we're kind of talking about milk, where does Gibbsville Cheese source their milk from?
I don't have any farms anymore. I work with different co-ops. I do a lot of organic. So I source milk from Crop, that's Organic Valley. I source milk from family dairies, from NFO. And I'll buy spot loads from other places. I do a lot of kosher for Passover. That comes from Rockline Farms. That's a big farm near Random Lake. So it's all pretty local. I mean, The organic gets some miles on it once in a while, because it's harder to source organic milk. But it's all from the eastern part of Wisconsin. All my milk comes, like my local routes. That's all probably 20-mile radius milk.
Okay. Now, Gibbsville Cheese has been making cheese for over 65 years. You're currently the fourth generation of your family operating the factory. Who were the first, and if I mispronounce this name, please correct me, but Van Tatenhoves?
Van Tatenhoves. I'm a Van Tatenhove, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. We've actually had it 89 years.
Oh, 89.
Yeah. My dad, wow. My grandpa got it 89 years ago.
Okay.
And if you look at the book here, you'll see who had it. My grandpa bought it from Louis Bear. Louis Bear got it from Fred Bolt, which there's still Bolts in the area yet. And there's actually, I can remember there being a Fred Bolt, but that was a grandson of the original Fred Bolt. There's Unks that had it in between there. Some name, Whistling had it in. A lot of people had it from 1873 till 1933. There was probably 5 different people had it in that time frame.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So tell us, so then your grandfather was the first one to take it over in your family.
In my family, yep.
And tell us a little bit about his story. How did he get to cheese making?
He was born in Holland, and when they came to Sheboygan, they came a lot later than most of the people from Holland around here. They went into Sheboygan, and, well, they're Dutch. Sheboygan's German. The Dutch hated the Germans, and the Germans hated the Dutch, so they couldn't stay in Sheboygan. So then they went to Falls. Sheboygan Falls got a lot of Dutch, but we're from the wrong part of Holland, so we weren't the right kind of Dutch. So they ended up going to County Trunk E between Cascade and Plymouth. There was a little town there. They got a historical marker there, but I can't remember what it's called. That Ford Farms was up there. That's where they farmed around there, but they weren't very good at farming. And during the Depression, part of them went to California, and then the ones that stayed around went to Kewaskum. And my grandpa started making cheese in a place in Kewaskum. I've gone past there, but I didn't take mental note because I was younger and I didn't really care at the time,
Sure.
But they made I should have made them, and now those roads are all different around Kewaskum. But then he was making cheese in Kewaskum, and my grandma worked for a lawyer in Sheboygan, and that was his lawyer. He married my grandma, and my grandma was not going to live out in Kewaskum. Okay. She was not moving to Kewaskum. She was from Hingham,
Okay.
And so she was not going out to Kewaskum. And basically she was the brains of the operation. She was a paralegal back in the day when that was
I was going to say that's early for her to be in that profession.
And my grandpa was 28. I think my grandma was like 26 or 27. That time,
that's late for getting together.
You're going to be a spinster by that time. Right. You're that old. If you're not, then that day, if you weren't married when you were 20, you were going to be an old spinster.
Yeah.
But she was very, very smart, photographic memory.
Wow.
Because when the factory burned down, we had over 100 patrons at that time, farmers, because it was all little canned milk, 1 or 2 canned farms. She had done payroll the day before. All the paperwork got burnt up. From memory, she could start the books over and be close enough. Yeah, she would.
Wow.
Yeah, she was really. My grandma always seemed like she was old. Because it was my grandma. But I mean, she always did the books. There used to be a house next door.
Yeah.
That's where the office was, because you didn't really need that formal of an office back then. But she was definitely the brains of the operation. That's she was for her time. To be in that she worked. She didn't. She moved to Sheboygan, worked in, never had a driver's license either. So that means when you moved to Sheboygan, you had to stay in Sheboygan or wherever you were.
You mentioned the fire in 1945 that destroyed the factory. How long had your grandparents owned it at that point when that happened?
12 years.
12 years.
Yep.
And what were the circumstances around that fire? And then at what steps did they take to rebuild?
Well, that was common. These are wood frame buildings with no fire retardant materials. And you had a boiler, a wood fire, a coal fire boiler. And yeah, it got hot and started on fire, and it had clapboard siding on it. And when it got hot, they fell off. When they hit the ground, they popped. And that's what woke them up. Otherwise, they would have died. Yes. Yeah. They would have slept through it. It was in the middle of the night. But they were down for about a year, and then all our milk went to Hingham Cheese Factory, which was that we were cousins, and it took a year to rebuild. A 13 months, I think they were down before they started making cheese again. And in that time, then they basically kind of did 2 shifts over at Hingham. Hingham would do their stuff, and then they would do their stuff afterwards.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of cheese factories around. Your milk could go a lot of different places. There was, like I said, at that time, there's probably still 100 cheese factories in Sheboygan County.
Now, you mentioned the boiler getting hot. That's where the fire started. Can you talk to us about the cheese making process then versus now? And some of those changes?
I wasn't around in 1945, right. But I can remember in the 60s. I mean, then it was all open vats. I can't remember wood-fired vats, but But that's what they used to do, was wood-fired. Yeah, it would be wood-fired vats. But, they had a boiler, so they had steam. So they were steam jacketed. That's the same technology they use today. They still have steam jacketed vats. But then they were open. They might have not even had an agitator on the top. You stirred them all out by hand. But when they rebuilt the factory, they put 4 vats in. And at the time, that was a big cheese factory. When they rebuilt, it'd have 4 vats, and they were 4 vats with agitators on. And we even had a milk holding tank. And that was like, oh man, a milk holding tank. Because otherwise the milk would come in. You wouldn't start until your milk came in. The farmers get done milking. Everybody would jump in a can truck, go around, pick up milk in cans. And that's when men were men, because a milk can weighs 90 pounds, with milk in it. And they double decked them in a milk truck and had to drag them into that and then dump them. You'd bring them in, dump them, run them through the can washer, put them back in the truck, and then go back out. Well, once the milk started coming in, it went right from the balance tank where they dumped and weighed the milk right to the pasteurizer, and then you started making cheese. Wow. And you made cheese till all your milk was gone. Well, then we had a holding tank, so we could put the milk from that balance tank in a holding tank, and they had that till World War II. And in World War II, very fine dairy needed that for bottling milk. So the War Commission or whatever took our milk tank and gave it to very fine, because bottling milk was more important than making cheese. So they lost their holding tank then. So that because they needed it for the war effort. So that's, what a different time.
Wow. So what part of the cheese making process are they using the heat during that pasteurization process?
You need it for your pasteurizer, because you got an HTSD that's high temperature, short time. Pasteurizing is just basically heating your milk up to like 165 degrees and then cooling it back down to say 88 degrees, because culture has to start growing at 80 to 90 degrees. If you get it over 105 degrees, you'll kill the culture. Mm-hmm. So that's an optimum temperature to grow the culture. Well, then once you set the milk and you cut the curd, you got to cook it now. So you got to take it to 88 up to your cook temperature. I mean, our cook temperature for cheddar, it's like in the low hundreds. If you're doing mozzarella or parm, it might go up to 110 or 115. Whatever product you're making determines your temperature where you'll cook to. So you need it for temperature, for cooking your cheese. Making cheese is just basically cooking. Yeah. It's just a cooking process. And you need steam to make hot water to clean. Right. Everything you clean is heated by steam.
Now, we talked a little bit about, at the beginning of the podcast, the milk affecting obviously the taste of the cheese due to what your cows are consuming or the climate or whatnot. Yeah. What are other things that affect the taste of your cheese?
Well, your age of your milk. I mean, how old your milk is. You want to use your milk as fresh as possible, but that doesn't always work that way. If you have any problems, and it is your culture program you're on. Your other ingredients, because milk's the main ingredient. Then you have your culture as your next basic ingredient, and your rennet. Rennet will affect the taste to a certain point. That's what coagulates the milk. If you use a vegetable-based rennet, you really won't get. You like to use a calf-based rennet or a clone of a calf-based rennet, if you're going to put cheese away for long hold, it just ages better. And some places, they use nothing but vegetable-based rennet because they don't really have long hold product. But your basic and most important one is your culture program. What kind of cheese culture you put in and what you're trying to achieve. I use a real like old-fashioned culture program. I actually still mix up like starter media, and I grow my own culture in a tank.
Okay.
Which that's kind of almost a thing of the past. One, because a lot of people don't want to fool around making starter. They don't know how to make, their culture. It's inconvenient. It's a lot more, now it's open a frozen bag of pellets that you buy. So there's only a couple companies left that actually make powder to make starter, that have bulk starter programs, because it's really going to more direct fat sets, they call them. You don't make it ahead of, you just open it, you keep them in your freezer, you open a bag and dump them in. You can see that it's obvious why that's easier. It's just easier. But as all these companies are buying each other out, you get fewer and fewer options, where everybody's just kind of tastes the same because you don't have any options.
And they're all using the same culture.
You start using the start, but everybody kind of likes their own custom thing. But it's kind of hard to get custom. You can use them in different combos, and they're going to work different every place they go. I mean, I don't have any luck making cheddar with a direct fat culture. It changes my. It's just too different. It's too different, and it just don't grow good. I don't know if it's something to do with because I'm on a bulk program that doesn't really coincide very well with a direct VAT set program, but I do use direct VAT sets because when you do kosher for Passover, you have to use a kosher for Passover culture. Mm-hmm. So you have to buy a frozen one. So them are frozen ones, and they don't work as good as my bulk set does, but they work. They work.
Since you're making your own, where did you learn about cultures? Was that something you went to school for, or did you learn it here growing up?
No, my mom actually used to do it. It's fairly easy now. It was years ago. You took milk and you put it in the tank, and you would have a mother culture. You would keep some of your culture from the day before, and you would grow it you would sterilize it in a pressure cooker, your media. You would dump your mother culture in there, and my mom used to grow that in the basement, and then you would dump it in that milk. So I watched them do that my whole life, which you don't do it even close. And that did not really work that great. You had a lot of cheese is much more consistent than it used to be. You made a lot of bad cheese, when, it just didn't work. Because if your mother culture would die and it wouldn't grow, you'd have to go to another factory and they'd give you like a gallon of their culture. Then you would try to grow that in your media. And then you would start. So then all of a sudden your whole culture program would change, and then if you had a lot of wood in your plant, you would, they call it flora now. You got your plant flora, but it was basically plant filth. Yeah. And that if you would clean up too good and clean everything up, all of a sudden you couldn't make cheese. Yeah. Because your flora would all die. So I mean, that's a little gross when you look back at that, but that's and people look back at that fondly, and that's not that fond to me. I mean, technology now is much better for your quality and reproducing, but there's a lot of little specialty plants that they're trying to reproduce that, that, and you don't have to do it. There's better ways to do it than that, and which if you find small culture companies, they have a lot of options, and you can custom make your kind of program if you're looking for something different.
If they're doing something that, and I'll just use old fashioned for an easy sort of term, but if they're doing something that old fashioned, is the concern safety of something getting in there that, like with these cheese factories that, like you were saying, if they cleaned up too well and you didn't have that flora, but if you had too much of it, were you then adding in disease or whatever it may be?
Yes, yeah. That not anymore. I mean, now that's the biggest challenge of making cheese now is we're SQF, that safe quality food, and they have such stringent, standards how your plant's got to operate, how you can't be SQF and have really any issues, when things are so different, I can remember years ago when guys would be making cheese, they'd be smoking and they'd set their cigarette on the edge of the vat and then work on the vat and take their smoke and put it. And I'm like, that's things you're never going to see anymore, and farms are so much cleaner and plants are so much cleaner. You have so much more oversight. I mean, but I'm old enough that I can remember that stuff. And you think, well, everybody will say, well, we weren't, it was safe. There wasn't anybody getting sick then. Well, there probably was people getting sick. There wasn't
maybe it wasn't deadly, but
there wasn't sick. When people died, you didn't know what they died from. And when people got sick, well, people were tougher back then. But if people got sick in one town, the town 6 miles down the road didn't even know it. Where now, if people on the other side of the world get sick from something, we live in the age of information where anytime you have a food safety issue, everybody's going to know about it. There's no, there's no, the way they track things now, we're in the age of information. You can know things instantly. There's a website you go on as part of our SQF program. You have to go on and track what's going on everywhere to make sure that you aren't using something from someplace that's having a problem. So that's they don't really have, if they would go back 30 years, they had very few incidences of foodborne illness. Well, they did have them. They just didn't have they didn't track them. Right. They just didn't know that. Right. Where now like I said, food is so safe now when it comes to we do hear more stuff, but it's only because we're getting more information, not because there's actually more problems. Because there's everything we make now got to be tested, go to a lab. It gets this full battery of tests. So if something happened, you'd have to screw up so many things that and things are just the technology of cleaning and just the way you operate is so much better. We don't even we really don't touch it anymore. Where before you always you had your hands in it. I mean, when you made it, you had your hands in it and you were sweating over the vats and stuff like that. Well, now you just kind of watch machines run now. Right. But the trick to that is trying to not lose that handmade feel and to try to get your machines to replicate what you were doing. Yes. That's the trick to that. Now that's why some places lose their old time flavor, or is when you automate, you change a lot of things.
Do the new processes take more of that good gut bacteria out that maybe was in some of these older, or is it pretty much keeping the same thing in because the same processes are being done? It's just in a more sanitary way.
Yeah. You shouldn't lose that because I'm basically still, when we did it by hand, I'm on the same basic starter culture program that I was then. So it's still growing the same thing. And for me, automating it really made the consistency better. We can stay on time much better than we did before. Because in my instance, my quality got better. It's so easy to, if I worked on a vat and then the next guy worked on the next vat, I did it a little different and he did it a little different. Now it just gets done over and over. As long as it gets done over and over the right way. I mean, if you did it over and over the wrong way, but as long as we stick to our culture grows good, our milk is good, it's actually better. It's more easy to replicate, over and over. When now you let the computer program, you watch it, but basically the program runs, program cooks the vat, pumps it on the belt, runs the belt. As long as you don't have a problem with that, or you want to, you got to tweak a little change once in a while because your culture doesn't always grow the same. And them are basic cheese making decisions that the cheesemaker's got to make when he's doing it. But basically, you have to override the system if you want to make a big change. Gotcha. So otherwise it kind of gets done the same way. So it really helps your consistency, long as you can get your automation to work like you did by hand, you know.
From the milk coming in to your finished cheese process, what's your timeline there?
When you're making cheddar, it's when the milk hits the pasteurizer till the cheese comes out the block forming tower, about 6 hours.
Okay.
You know, and it's not like one batch goes for 6 hours. We fill a vat in 55 minutes. So every 55 minutes, we got a new batch coming. So we start running milk at 3:15 in the morning. We're done running milk maybe 1 o'clock. And so it's constantly. There's one batch going, and right behind it is another batch going, and they just keep going. You know, we do 10 batches a day usually.
Okay. I want to jump back to a quick question about cheese coloring. What do you use to color your cheese? And do you color all of your cheese?
We don't color all of it.
If you can share what you use to color your cheese.
Just a natto.
Okay.
Seed. Everybody uses a natto seed coloring.
What I had when I researched that was what I had saw.
That's what everybody colors cheese with.
Yep.
And then you ask, why do you color cheese? Because when you go on the East Coast, there's very little colored cheese. But the reason they started coloring cheese originally is because when you had a lot of small farms and they were all grass-fed, basically, your milk at different times of the year was such different color.
Sure.
Sometimes of the year it would be far yellower, because if they're eating real fresh green grass, green and white makes yellow. So that milk would look a lot more yellow. In the winter, when they were on baled hay or on more corn, milk's whiter. So to try to get it to look the same all the time, that's why they started coloring milk.
Yeah. So we talked about the 6-hour time frame of milk coming out to cheese that you're doing here, and you're doing 10 of those batches a day. Now you're doing aged cheddars as well and aged cheeses. So talk to us a little bit about that process of then aging it.
Well, when I make every vat of cheddar I make gets made the same, like it's going to be put away for aged. It doesn't all get put away for aged. It get made. Some we cut when it's 20 days old. Some gets cut when it's 4 months old. Some gets cut when it's a year old, and some gets cut when it's 4 or 5 years old. And it's just aging is exactly what it says. You know, you take the pallet across the road and it sits in the cooler for 4 years. You know, I don't make my cheese different for if I'm making mild, because when I make it, I don't really know what I'm going to use it for yet. You know, some customers I do. Some customers I know they want to shred it in 21 days. That'll make a little different. You know, because cheese for shredding, you want a little more moisture in it because it'll shred nicer. Cheese you're going to put away to age for a long time, you want it drier. You know, because it just makes better cheese.
Yeah.
If there's too much moisture in it, I always say it'll get a little bitter as it ages.
Okay. Now, Gibbsville, are you guys local to Wisconsin, the Midwest, or are you shipping nationally?
The stuff I make for myself that actually gets a Gibbsville cheese label on is probably less than 10%, and that's more southeastern Wisconsin. But majority of my cheese I make is for somebody else.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like today, everything I'm making today is for somebody else. Everything I'm making tomorrow is for somebody else. Everything I'm making Wednesday is for somebody else. I don't know if I'm making any. Well, I have curd. I got a bag this week. My bag curd. So this week, out of I'll make say 60,000 pounds of cheese this week. Probably 1,000 pounds we'll get a Gibbsville label on. Everything else it's for somebody else.
And by somebody else, you mean larger cheese distributors that are more nationwide or global?
Yeah. Well, basically today I'm making kosher for Passover. So that all goes to the kosher for Passover company,
Gotcha.
Global Foods. That's what we're doing it for today. Tomorrow I'm doing organic for Organic Valley. On Wednesday I'm doing kosher, a lower level of kosher for Passover without supervised milking. I'm doing that on Wednesday. Thursday I'm doing stuff for Organic Valley, and after that something for Emmy Roth. And on Friday I'm doing a vat for a local farmer that wants to do the cheese business, and another local farmer that's bringing me some milk that he wants to do some stuff with. And I got to look on my schedule. There might be a vat or two that I end up keeping out of all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of that. And that's typical for me, in a week. I'm small, so I'm flexible. I can do, you don't need a big volume of milk for me to run stuff,
Gotcha.
like small batch production, which small batch production for me is 16,000 pounds of milk. My vats are 16,000 pounds, which sounds like a lot, but there's places that have 80,000 pound vats. Like what I run all day, like Cedar Valley or Baker or like Lake to Lake, they'll run that in an hour. They run that much milk in an hour.
Wow.
What it takes me all day. So that's a difference in scale.
Yeah. So you have local small farmers coming to you and saying, hey, we want to like label our own cheese.
Yep.
So you're doing some white label stuff for them.
Yep. Little Brown Cow. And now, what's the name of Strockview's label? Jersey Valley.
Mm.
Yeah.
And did you guys market that as a service to increase business going from like a local cheese farm? Or did people just start coming to you and going, hey, we heard you have great cheese. We want to work with you. We want to create our own brand.
No, I didn't. One is a friend of mine. Little Brown Cow, that's Donnie Wilterding. He was a farm. He was one of my farmers.
I know Donnie Wilterding.
Yeah.
I grew up with his daughter.
Yeah, he's Little Brown Cow. He wants cheese made on Jersey milk. Well, Jersey milk basically has got too much fat in it to make it long hold. It'll get a little. It's got so much. It's so rich a milk, it'll get a little rancid. Mm. So I'll take that and I'll mix that with some of my normal milk that comes in, and we make, so it's like half Jersey milk, half Holstein milk, and then I cut it. I make it into 40-pound blocks, and I cut it into 1-pounders, and him and his bunch of kids,
yes,
basically are running around selling this all over.
Yeah,
because the hard part of all that, the startups, is not, they have the milk. They can find someone to make cheese, but you got to find some place to sell your cheese.
Yes.
It's that's the hard part. You just can't go to a store and say, "Hey, I'm here with some cheese. Can you find a spot for me?" That's not how it works. But now, like Strockview, they have some jerseys and some Holsteins, but they're on a breeding program. They're trying to produce cheese that's A2H2. A2H2 is milk that is easier for people that are lactose intolerant to tolerate.
Okay.
So that is A2H2. Wow. Okay. I don't know what A2H2 stands for. Yeah, you'd have to ask Kenny Strock exactly, but that's through breeding. People have tried that before through different feeding programs, and but now they're doing it with breeding.
Gotcha.
So he started doing it maybe 6 months ago, and he's trying to run around and market his cheese, so.
And then some of the bigger, more national food providers or whatever it may be that are coming to you, and whether it's the kosher or different items, they're seeking you out, or do you have a program to go out and say, hey, if you need cheese made here's what we can do?
It's kind of a little both. Most of them find me. I don't.
Wow.
I have enough stuff to do during the day that I don't really, I don't have really time to sell. I like working with big companies, and especially if they source milk, like organic companies or kosher companies. I don't even have to source the milk. Mm. They'll source the milk, bring it in, and all I got to do is make cheese out of it, do the QA on it. It's milk in, cheese out. And that's pretty simple. I don't have to source milk. I don't have to sell cheese. All I have to do is make it.
Yeah.
That's
and then
optimum.
They label it on their own?
Yeah, some I cut for them, but generally it just moves out on a pallet in a 40-pound block, and then that's very simple. Not all of them are that simple, but years ago, you used to have to sell everything you made, and I like working on that because my risk is very low.
Right.
I don't sit with a lot of inventory. Then it's pretty easy when, and you always hate accounts that as soon as you make it, they're wondering when they can pick it up. but it's kind of fun. It's kind of easy because it's gone right away and you get paid right away. And so, that's kind of nice. But over the years, I've had, when I started doing organic, oh God, that was probably 30 years ago. That was very small. And there was a lot of small ones trying to get into organic. So as they knew, you could do a little research and figure out where the milk's going and what they're doing with it. And people would call me. I'm going to think I probably made cheese for probably 5 different organic places. And I'm going to say all but one failed because they thought we have organic milk. Well, that's hard to get organic milk. That's a long transition. So they think they got that. Now we found some place that can make it for us. So now we got a 30,000 pound load of milk. Well, that'll make basically 3,000 pounds of cheese. Now you want to cut into an 8 ounce. Now you got 6,000 8-ounce units to sell. They thought they were over the hump when they got to that point. No.
But now you got to sell.
No, you hit the spot. Now it would never take them long before they ran out of money, because they had no place to sell it. So you got to revert. You almost have to have a place to sell it first and then make it. But how do you sell something you don't have? That's always the catch-22 of them startups.
Yeah.
You got to do it backwards, and unless they're backed by a big company that can fund this, it's almost impossible to do it. It's even harder now than it was.
And you guys have a cheese store. So for our listeners out there, we're sitting in Gibbsville Cheese Factory today, and I walked through the cheese store to come back here. You guys are selling cheese out in your cheese store. How long have you had a cheese store on site? This entire 89 years?
No, early 70s.
Okay.
I would say we always, before we had the actual store built on, we had just a little cooler where people would just walk in and get what they wanted, and it was an honor thing, or somebody would
cash in a box.
Yeah, basically. People would walk in the back door, just come walking in, and that's so funny now because we have to have cameras everywhere. Everything's got to be locked up, and that's one thing you won't see anymore is people just coming in. And we used to we would run milk in a 10-gallon can with a ladle by it, and if people wanted milk, they would just take milk out of it. I'm just like into her pitcher, and pay for their milk. I'm like, oh man, wow. That's why we have so much food safety now. And I'm thinking, we survived,
Yeah.
But that, like I said, that I can actually remember. That was like in the 60s. Because when I used to get off the bus, from kindergarten, my grandma lived next door, and my mom was usually in here working. So I came in here every day when I was like 5, 6 years old, and I thought I was helping. They'd give me stuff to do only to keep me out of the way, I'm sure. But they'd give me jobs to do. So that I actually can remember.
And the cheese store here, growing up, this is where we came and got our cheese from the cheese store here. Every time I come into this cheese store and pick up the cheese. How busy is your cheese store here? Is that a majority of the Gibbsville branded cheese is being sold out of this store?
Yes. Yeah. Everything that gets a Gibbsville label on. We handle Pine River cheese spread also. And it's basically, I get stuff from Chalet, like Swiss, because stuff we don't make. Yeah. I source from other places. But yeah, I try to sell as much of the Gibbsville stuff as I can here. They built the original store I'm thinking in the early 70s. I think 1973. Then in 1982, they built a piece on the back and expanded it. Because like I said, it's a nice little cash supplement.
Yeah. What are your top items that you sell out of the store?
Cheese curd.
Yep.
And our normal cheese, besides cheese curd, 1 pound medium and 1 pound sharp. Sell both the most. That's my 2 most popular varieties.
Talk to us a little bit about cheese curds. That's the Wisconsin, that's what we're known for. That's what everyone jokes around about. Tell us about kind of a little brief history of the cheese curd.
Well, cheese curd you don't make cheese curd special. Right. Cheese curds just are made. It just, they get pressed up to a 40-pound block. we always sold cheese curds. The question was, how did you perfect cheese curds? It didn't really have, all we did is put it in a bag and sell it to, at first it was kind of weird because you're buying cheese that's only half done. That's basically, it's cheese that's not done, and now it's, like I said, there's plants now that all they do is cheese curds, that, we didn't have to perfect it. You only had to perfect the package you put it in, because that's the easiest thing to make, because you didn't even finish it,
Your fourth generation?
I'm third.
Third generation.
My son is fourth.
Okay. So. What mark are you leaving on Gibbsville cheese, or do you think every generation has left a mark, or is it more just improving on some of the processes like we talked about? The vats aren't being heated by wood or steam anymore in that old traditional manner. Is that just we're improving, or is there something that you want to leave a mark as third generation?
Well, I didn't really have a mark I'd set but everybody's got to get across their challenges. My grandpa at the time, that's when they first made milk, that was cans. Then it went cans to bulk tanks. And when bulk tanks came in, then you had grade A milk. And then Borden's built their Borden's plant in Milwaukee, and basically they would give farmer a bulk tank and get them set up to be grade A. So at one time, Borden's came in and took all our milk. Wow. And they basically told all those little, and that's when a lot of, like in the 50s, that's when probably half of the little cheese factories didn't survive.
Wow.
So he had to get us across that. And then when my dad ran it, he had to get it, he had to rebuild that back, because then the how they paid for milk changed. Otherwise bottling plants got all the A milk, cheese factories had the B. A paid more, so everybody was transitioning. Well, finally they had to change the formula for paying for milk, because no can guys left anymore. Very few, B guys were less and less all the time. Mm-hmm. So then when it swung around, how they paid for milk. All of a sudden, cheese factories actually there was more lucrative to make cheese out of A milk than put it in a bottle. And bottled milk has been sliding the consumption, and cheese has been going the other way. So, he had to transition across, and then there was stuff they had to do in the plants, as food safety stuff got tighter. All of a sudden, your pasteurizer, you used to just put it online. You trusted, okay, it's up to 160, we'll start running milk through. And it could have went down to 140 or what. There was then they had to put what they call the flow diversion valve. And that's when your pasteurizer gets under a certain temperature, it goes off. Oh. And it recirculates the milk, so you can't not pasteurize it. Well, a lot of that was back in the early 80s, to buy the valves and the controls to run it. It was like $30,000. And at the time, that was $30,000 in 1980. So that hacked off a lot more cheese factories again, because they were because they couldn't, they're $30,000, that'd be like spending $500,000 now,
right.
And so that took out a lot of them. So, then you had to make your decision. Do we keep going? We transition from cans to bulk tanks? Now you got to the next step, the next step to go. So my dad, I was thinking, he got me across that, and he got us more into the modern times. Mm-hmm. He built a warehouse across the road. He built the store. He built a piece on the back. He kind of got us, him and my mom, they started our mail order, which we don't do the mail order anymore because it was just getting too hard to do the mail order. That you can't do everything. You just can't do it all. But they got us kind of through, kept it going, basically, and kind of modernized the infrastructure. Well, 13 years ago, I built a piece on the back, and my mark is I took us the next step in it, because you would never, if we'd have to go back and run the volume of milk we do now the way we used to do it, you just couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. You'd have to stay super small, and I'm still super small, only because I'm not growing as fast as other guys have grown. Me and Baker Cheese at one time, like in the 80s, probably ran the same amount of milk. where now I run 150,000 a day, and they run 2.5 million pounds a day. So I mean, they have and their generations but they're in the they're in the string business, which is a specialty business, but they're all in on string. Because we love string. America loves string cheese. It's handy as can be. And as that string grew, they paced right with it. But like I said, at one time we were all about the same size. We just grew at different rates, and they grew because they had to, and I grew at the rate that I had to. That I don't want a big plant like that. Yeah. I have enough headaches with a small plant.
How many people do you have employed here at Gibbsville?
I think 12.
Okay.
Yeah, with everybody in the office and 14. My wife says 14.
Okay. So there's probably not many people, unless it's super small batch, getting into cheese making nowadays, I would assume. They're maybe just going, hey, I have a farm, a small hobby farm, and I'm doing this as a hobby to make my own, maybe in a traditional style or something. But my guess would be there's not a lot of people being like, I'm going to start a cheese factory.
If I always liked this romantic idea that I was always going to build a small little cheese factory right on the highway, right on I-43, and make like one vat a day, and sell everything right on the highway. And if you'd have to do that today, I don't know if you could do it for $1 million. By the time you built your building or found a building and got all the stuff you needed to do that and to do it, efficiently, that you could make some money, I think it would be $1 million. And who's got $1 million? People that have $1 million just sit on their $1 million. They don't want to. They're not take their $1 million and work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's so hard. There's a farm around Madison that has called me that wants to do the same thing them guys, but he doesn't have enough milk, and he's too far away to bring his milk here to do it. And then he asked me about doing it on the farm, and there's places that do it on the farm, but you better have a big farm and you better have some good cash flow, because like I said, it's going to cost a lot of money to get up and going. And then when you're all ultimately done, you better make something good that people want to buy, and you got to find a place to sell it. You can have something really good, but no place to sell it. And then if they don't know anything, if you aren't doing it, if there was somebody that he worked for somebody like for 10 years and he knew exactly what he was getting into making cheese and what he needed, and you could go source stuff and you do things completely right, it'd still be hard. Wow. And most farmers don't have any cheese making experience. They have milking, farm experience.
Right.
And they, like I said, it's not, I always say it's not as easy as it looks. Making cheese basically is pretty easy. It's just a cooking process. And once you got it mastered, it's fairly easy and repeatable. But it's your sales. You have to have sales.
Yeah.
It's not hard making cheese, but it is hard making money on cheese.
Yeah.
That's the kick on it. And there's small places that start up, but like I said, it's a lot of work. And now, I mean, pre-COVID, things were expensive to get up and going. Now it's much worse now and much harder to get stuff done, period.
There was, and maybe you don't have an answer for this, but I didn't have it on our questions today, but what you just said about COVID made me think of this. I would say, and maybe I have the time frames wrong here, but maybe 6 months into COVID, we were seeing pictures on the news of milk being dumped out of trucks, or people saying that milk's being dumped out. Number one, was that true? Two, if it was, why was that happening?
Well, because people were going to the grocery stores and buying a bunch of milk. So they said, "Oh, you can only buy 1 gallon of milk." So you can only buy 1 gallon of milk. What are your store sales doing your milk?
Yeah.
That all of a sudden, because you had,
so they were saying, okay, we think
they should have let people buy as much milk as they wanted because there's plenty. But what made it back up all at one time is sheer panic. When all of a sudden the state of Wisconsin, they say, "Oh, nobody can go to work," because my employees are asking me, "What are we going to do? we're going to keep working. Milk's going to keep coming.
Yeah.
We're not stopping. And if we stop making food, aren't people going to starve to death? This makes no sense.
Right.
It makes no sense, So, but that whole panic of that, and then people that were, what made the stuff back up was that people that are in food service into restaurants, that all of a sudden their milk, them were plants that shut down.
Right.
Because we have no sales. But people had to eat at home. People had to eat, like people that were like making mozzarella, that have like pizza chains. They thought their business was going to die until they figured out that, we can't have people eating here, but we can have takeout. We can still have delivery. And I know a couple guys in the pizza business. He said when we were swamped, we were so busy because we were the only food option. People wanted to pick up something. All the restaurants are closed except if you were set up for takeout or delivery, where pizza places generally are. Yeah. And that whole combination with people panicking that are in the food service, like places that make like feta and blue cheese that goes on salad bars, they still haven't recovered. Because a lot of salad bars never reopen, and most of that cheese people do not buy and take home.
Right.
They almost eat that all in a sit down. You don't get a salad with feta or blue cheese on as a takeout.
Right.
So some of that stuff has still really not come back.
Wow.
But the pizza stuff took off, and then when they limited people to only buy 1 gallon of milk. And then you're seeing pictures of them dumping, Vorpals dumping tanker load of milk into the manure pit.
Yeah.
That was just nobody really thought about everyone has good intentions, but
there's so much more behind that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Like I said, that and because I do stuff for Emmy Roth. Emmy Roth's got up in Seymour, they have a big blue cheese plant. And they're like, we got to do something with this milk. Well, they brought it here, and I made white cheddar for them.
Yeah.
Well, after they opened back up there, and I always made some white cheddar for Emmy Roth. I didn't make white cheddar for a year because they had so much white cheddar that they didn't need any cheese for a while.
Yeah. What is next for Gibbsville Cheese?
I'm not sure. I'm 61 years old. I'm not really ready to quit yet, but that's something I got to kind of start looking at a little bit. I have my son. He's 30. 5 years ago, I don't think he was all that thrilled about it. As he's getting older, I think he, the grass is always greener. I work for my dad. Working for your dad isn't always that great. But I'm thinking now when he looks at doing other things, maybe working for your dad isn't that bad. And he doesn't really work for me. He's I'm president, he's vice president, but that doesn't really mean nothing. We're all working. We're all doing something. He's down working tables. I'm loading away trucks. That's them are just titles that don't really mean anything. But I think he likes it more. I look back at before I was married, my dad probably thought the same thing. Because all I wanted to do was play sports and screw around but when I was 24 years old, I was married. And when you're married and then you have some kids, you don't do that anymore, and you get a little more serious about life. And he's got the skill set to do it, but does he want to do it? But I have
the next generation.
I have good guys. I don't turn. All my guys are good. I mean, I don't really have to be here. I'm here a lot, only because I really like being here a lot.
Yeah.
I don't really, shouldn't say I have to be here a lot, but I don't have anything better to do, basically. There's nothing else I really want to do.
Yeah.
So I plan on working for a while yet, I hope.
What's something about Wisconsin cheese history or culture that you'd like to leave with our listeners? Anything in particular? Actually,
people in Wisconsin should appreciate what a cornucopia of different stuff they can get in Wisconsin, that even people that live close to a cheese factory, what a cheese curd is. If you didn't live close to a cheese factory, you don't know what a cheese. Now people all over the country know what a cheese curd is, but when you throw them a cheese curd, they're like, how come it's not breaded and deep fried? Right. They don't really know. That people in Wisconsin, we're spoiled on food anyhow, period. I mean, you go to other parts of the country, and you don't have to even go that far. When they think cheese, they think of 5-pound loaf of sliced processed cheese,
right, yeah.
just like processed goo. Where we're so spoiled that you should appreciate what really good stuff we got. Not just good Gibbsville, but you don't last anywhere making bad product. And any cheese factory that's still going is making something good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be here.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out today to talk to us about Gibbsville cheese, about Wisconsin cheese culture. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for stopping.
Thank you for being a listener of Conversation Mill. The podcast is growing, but we need your continued support in the form of comments, likes, and subscriptions. If you've enjoyed even one episode, please take 2 minutes to comment under the episode or the podcast itself, or rate the podcast. Hitting the subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast helps tremendously. Every like and subscribe helps me support local businesses and local nonprofits by giving them a platform to tell their stories. Together, we can foster the understanding, diversity, and economies that make our individual communities flourish, while creating our own community here at Conversation Mill. Also, you can join us at conversationmill.substack.com, where you can become a member and receive weekly member-only content, including member-only episodes. I look forward to sharing a new conversation with you next week, and as always, thank you for your support.